a beautiful day to become a citizen.
Like a fast-beating metronome, the world's population continues to grow, rapidly and steadily, at a rate of approximately 150 people per minute. Since 1960, our population has grown from 180 million to more than 320 million. In the United States, immigration is what drives population growth. The major categories of this continuing influx contribute approximately 3 million people each year to our population total. One man determined to do something about population growth and immigration in the United States is Dr. Dale Herder of Charlevoix, up the west coast of Lake Michigan from Holland. A retired college administrator and Naval Reserve officer, he is a dedicated citizen activist who puts aside his love of sailing for advocacy of what he calls a rational immigration policy.
Our current conundrum regarding immigration, in my opinion, and this is in the context of the soon-to-conclude administration of President Obama, is such that it can be compared with the Gordian knot. I think the Gordian knot is unlikely to be untied. Therefore, it might have to be cut. One thing has to happen, in my opinion, as a citizen activist and as an American who's concerned about the future of our country, and that is that the knot has to be released. How will that Gordian knot be cut? I think one of two ways, and I think it will. One way will be because we learn from Europe. What is happening in Europe today is most educational. The influx of refugees, particularly from the Middle East, but also from Northern Africa and Central Africa, I think is a lesson we should be studying carefully and use what we learn from the European experience that is current as we go forward. The second thing that might cut the Gordian knot, and I hesitate to even talk about it, is another tragic attack on the United States, particularly if, as in the case of 9/11, the perpetrators are illegals.
A major reason for Dr. Herder's pessimism is the continuing stagnation of the debate about the meaning of immigration reform since the Reagan years. But he believes his rational point of view will win out in the end.
I think of myself as a realistic optimist. And even though this is a challenge that's enormous, I'm going to continue to work as a citizen activist, and I'm going to encourage my friends and colleagues to do the same. A blend of rationality and compassion is where we need to be as a nation and where we always have been as a nation. But the left, I think, wants more compassion, more family reunification, and cynics on the right would say more voters. No more amnesty, no more talk of amnesty. Don't create an incentive for people around the world to say, if my daughter gets in, she can stay, because they all will want to come. We can't afford it, we can't sustain it.
Dr. Herder's personal hero of the immigration battle is the late Barbara Jordan, who headed the U.S. Commission on Immigration Reform during the early years of the Clinton administration.
The U.S. Immigration Commission was created in the 1990s, and for a lot of us it was seen as the best hope. It turns out that it was the last best hope for what I consider to be rational immigration reform. President Clinton appointed retired Congresswoman Barbara Jordan to chair this commission, bipartisan commission. Its findings were nearly unanimous. She worked at it with her commission for several years. The report came out in 1994 as a preliminary report.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace as recommended by the commission headed by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
Barbara Jordan was a Democrat, African-American, dedicated person who wanted Americanization for immigrants. That's a delicate term nowadays because Americanization isn't agreed to by everybody as a good thing. Some see it as pushing our values on others. The bottom line is that her report was remarkably, I think, balanced and fair and rational. It contained, for example, the recommendation that we should have a cap on legal immigration, and that cap should be reviewed by Congress periodically and adjusted as needs might dictate. The need, the primary need, the driving need, was national interest. She recommended, her commission recommended, a cap of about 550,000 legal immigrants per year.
The Jordan Commission's final report was submitted in 1997. It was largely ignored by the President and Congress. Since then, the concept of immigration reform continues to be hotly debated in Washington from time to time, and demonstrations continue to take place. And some presidents issue executive orders, but the law remains unchanged. Dr. Herder is now a board member of FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, which favors a sharp decrease in the annual number of immigrants legally allowed into the United States. FAIR's opposition in the political arena includes major business organizations, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, large and well-funded pro-immigration groups like the National Council of La Raza, and the Catholic Church.
As the world's greatest economic power, the United States has an obligation to be more generous in immigration. Church teaching looks at the whole world, not just one individual nation, and says to the, we've got rich nations, we've got poor nations. Immigration is a sign of that, is sort of a symptom of a world in which there's inequality. For the United States, the church position is that this is a win-win issue because not only are you being generous in immigration, which is a humane policy, but we also think, and we can bear that out with the facts, is that immigrants are good for this country. They've built this country, they fill important jobs, they bring new cultures, new energy to this country. So in the current situation, in our current era, we believe it's not a hard decision to look at our system and retool it so that it is a bit more generous. We want a humane system where they can come in legally and contribute to our country, and I think that's where the church really could be a strong voice in the debate. The Catholic Church in the United States is an immigrant church. We've grown with the nation. We've helped receive the waves of immigrants from Europe, the Irish, the Italians, Eastern Europeans, and we've helped integrate them over the last 200 years. A lot of people don't understand that. We're the largest institution outside government that welcomes immigrants to this country. We've got English instruction classes, we have civics instruction. The first place that an immigrant will go is to the local parish and say, I need this, I need some help, where can I find a job? And the parish, to the best of their ability, will help them, and the dioceses will help them. Right now, in the current system, we say, no, we can't. We can't get you legalized because the system is the way it is. But we're going to try to change the system for you. And so that's really the reason, ultimately, why the church is in this debate, to help those people that are in our parishes and are in our pews, that are in our social service programs, our hospitals, and our schools. Immigration in this country is often examined or dissected in terms of economics, or in social impact of immigrants or cultural issues. But from the church perspective, it's ultimately a humanitarian issue and thus has moral implications because it impacts people and their lives. So in the upcoming debate, what the faith groups and what the Catholic Church is going to do is try to raise up the humanitarian issues in this debate, to remind our public officials that these are human beings and that they have lives and that they share the values that all Americans share, that they want to have families, they want to worship, they want to contribute to their communities, and they work hard, just like all Americans. Often that's missed in the debate. We get lost in the economics of, do they take jobs, or do they drain our resources? Do they change our neighborhoods? Are they going to change what America is about? And all those, I believe, are legitimate issues to address. But ultimately, we need to look at, what kind of nation do we want to be? How do we want to embrace the world? How do we want to welcome people from around the world who might not be exactly like us, but can help make up our country and make it stronger?
It's always rational for a country to say, we're going to configure an immigration policy based on our national interest. That's an absolutely appropriate thing for the United States to do. I don't think anyone has ever successfully demonstrated that reuniting with your closest family members is not in the national interest. In theory, there is a numerical point at which immigration might not be good for the United States. There isn't any evidence to suggest that we're anywhere near that point. The economic evidence shows that immigrants really do quite well, and not just do well for themselves, but do well for the country. The social evidence demonstrates very clearly that immigrants adapt quite well to life in this country, that language acquisition rates, the rate at which people learn English, is the same as it was in the early part of this century. That adoption of our country's most sacred values, participation in the political process, participation in our economic life, participation in our civic life, is stronger in immigrant communities than it is in Native communities. So surely there is a point at which immigration without limit would not benefit this country. But we have limits, and those limits appear to have served us pretty well.
Well, on the whole issue of sustainability, can we take all of these immigrants? Can we actually afford to legalize? The question for us is, can we sustain the current system? Can we close the doors and have less immigration at a moment when our own population is graying, at a moment where the replacement statistics are going against us? I think we cannot afford the latter. The question is, how fast does the United States want to continue to grow? And how competitive does it want to remain in coming years vis-a-vis other countries? Without immigration, economically, we're going to diminish without the help of these workers. But when we talk about the numbers, a lot of the discussion is, well, what is the right number? Let's keep it low, let's keep it high. We believe that it needs to be rational.
Sadly, President Clinton shelved the Barbara Jordan report. A tragic situation, and done for reasons I can understand, although I disagree with them, that were essentially political. Congress did not get the baton passed to it from the president, from the executive. Therefore, the legislative branch did not act. And we've been in a drift ever since. And the drift has led to compassion. Wonderful. Compassion is good, unless it becomes irrational, and unless it begins to not serve our national interest. And family reunification as the prime driver for immigration policy in the United States today, in my opinion, is not serving the national interest. We need to know who is coming in. We need to know how many are coming in. We need to know that our laws are rational and fair, and we need to enforce them.
Possible solutions to the immigration conundrum seem limited and long-range to others who have studied the world's population growth.
One of the consequences of a sort of an open-door policy on immigration is that it takes the pressure off of other governments to deal with the issue. As long as Mexico's unemployed can move north of the border in search of jobs and income that they can send home to help sustain the economy, and it's a major factor now in the Mexican economy. And as Mexico's oil production drops now, and it's dropping very fast, these pressures are going to intensify because oil is probably close to half of the total revenue for the government of Mexico. If they lose that, it'll put enormous pressure on. So we've got to deal with the population pressure everywhere, and we need to be thinking worldwide about how we bring population growth to a halt. And I have written in many times over the years that the world's leaders, whether the president of the World Bank or the Secretary General of the UN or the President of the United States, should be talking about the consequences of continuing population growth and why we need to be thinking about stopping it too, everywhere.
What do we do to close the gap between rich and poor parts of the world? What might we do to create jobs in Mexico or Algeria or Egypt such that young Mexicans or Algerians or Egyptians would not want to leave to come to Europe or the United States? Now that becomes a very much more proactive and actually quite radical way of thinking. It's not the negative keep them out, it's not the medium calibrated who do we let in and who do we not let in. It's saying how do we deal with the root cause of this, which is their deprivation, their lack of access to good jobs, their lack of hope in their own countries, so that's why they start placing hope elsewhere. But that would involve us in really serious policy rethinkings. There's little evidence of such leadership with vision in the developed world today. We're too beset with our short-term agendas, our political campaigns, our dealing with pressure groups who are also thinking short-term. So our political leaders tend to think short-term. My deepest thought is, do we need to have another really cathartic experience before we say we really do need to empower international structures and organizations and bodies and international civic society to help handle the challenges of the vast imbalances between North and South and rich and poor and environmentally advantaged and environmentally deprived? Or can we not do it because we can't summon the willpower and the insight and the vision to grasp this nettle now? We need the awful stimulus of another catastrophe.